Good morning. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. We're here with Monday's morning briefing after another successful weekend for Celtic away to Ross County. 4-1 in the Highlands, Tony. You were up there with Ryan. A long trip, a long cold trip. It looks like it looked freezing up there. Have you thawed out yet?
I've thawed out, -9, I think it was. It's at the worst part, John. But yeah, I've thawed out. Celtic, certainly in the last 10 minutes, warmed us up. And Kyogo's performance was heartwarming as well. So yeah, it was a job done again, John. So yeah, enjoyed it.
Nice to see that sort of impact from Kygo again, wasn't it? And I think interesting, and Rodgers talked about this after the game, that yeah, he played Kyogo on the right wing, but he utilised that right wing position in a slightly different way, didn't he?
Yeah.
In the 4-1 win, in terms of like Kyogo coming in more centrally and then like Engels and Johnston providing more of that width and support. I thought it was a little interesting tactical tweak. Just Rodgers using the best personnel available to him rather than fitting players into a system. And I thought it actually worked really well. I thought Celtic looked pretty good on Saturday.
Yeah, because he wasn't played as an out-and-out winger.
No.
Or as my father once said to one of his players, a down-and-out winger, who didn't understand that instruction. But yeah, they were coming in short and deep and drifting out, and then whenever one drifted out, the other one came in central. So it did work really well, because I think what happened was nobody really knew where Kyogo was playing, so he was difficult to pick up, and he kind of roamed around, didn't he? He went out wide and then came in, and it worked a treat. And as you say, I'd asked the manager about that, how he thought that Kyogo Adamida had worked, how that dimension had worked, and that was the answer he gave me. It was kind of like he went into a wee bit of detail, talked about the tweet, because I was interested in it, that dynamic, to see, and everybody was was thinking about that, see how the two of them would play. And yeah, it was good to see Kyogo back doing what he does best. Scored 2 brilliant goals. His header's excellent. Lots of people saying the keeper could, but I think it's the way it's angled and it's arrowed, and it's a deft touch from the header, so great. But just great to see him back doing what he does best. Again, everybody looking into body language and lack of celebration and smiles and all that, John, because it had been the backdrop being the MLS stuff with Atlanta and all that kind of stuff. But you don't want to be losing a goal scorer like that. And especially, it was a welcome return to form for Kyogo. And you only need to listen to guys like Callum McGregor and Arne Engels talk about him. They love him. He's well liked. He's well respected. And the manager as well was saying he doesn't want to lose him. So, yeah, I'd be loath to see him go in the transfer window, but I have to say that.
And I think, whatever happens has happened, and nobody, like, obviously fans are certainly not in control of that. To an extent, Rodgers might not even be in control of who leaves when, in terms of if offers come in and the club decide it's the right business moving forward, Kyogo's turning 30, etc. What you want, though, is you want players to go out in the right way. And if this is Kyogo's last few weeks in a Celtic shirt, you want him to be performing at his best. You want him to be performing like he did on Saturday. Because he's so excellent when he's on top form, and when he finds those wee touches of finishing and he gets on a wee consistent scoring run, he's devastating for defences in Scotland and potentially in Europe as well. And if we're looking ahead, and everyone is, to the young boys game, then you're wanting Kyogo still here and motivated to play, and then whatever happens after that happens after that.
Yeah.
As you say, people can start reading too much into it, but I'm one of those people who's like, I don't really care what all the noise is. If the player's playing well on the pitch, I don't really care. I don't really care if he's showing happiness and celebrations and whatnot. Like, it's incidental to me.
Yeah.
Kyogo proved that he still wants to perform for Celtic while he's still here, whatever happens with that performance that he produced on Saturday.
I'm pretty much living in the here and now, John.
Yeah.
And I think Kyogo was living in the here and now on Saturday, and it isn't a what will be will be. But I was delighted with his performance, and when he's like that, he is impossible to pick up. He was just drifting into pockets of space, and he was so involved, wasn't he? That's the most I've seen Kyogo involved in a long, long time. And as you say, it's that tactical tweak. You can call it a tactical masterclass, call it what you like.
Oh, but nice.
His hand was forced, wasn't it? Brendan Rodgers' hand was forced. And lots of people were talking about Adamida's contribution. I actually liked Adamida's contribution on Saturday. That lovely flick to, I think it was Hatate who then gave it to McGregor for Johnston across for Kyogo for the first goal. It's that flick that creates the space, and that's an important goal of the game. That's the opening goal, and it sets you up. And Celtic were playing pretty well at that time. Can't legislate for Alistair Johnston just barging out a guy and trying to split the road, you know what I mean, to Ross County get back in. But again, I get back there, it's a real strong finish from Celtic, and that's what I loved about them. Not content to win the game 2-1 when Kygo scored after 81 minutes. They still went about their business in the last 10 really professionally and clinically. And people saying it wasn't a 4-1 game, but when you look back, it kind of was, because Celtic were pretty dominant for long periods of that. And their goalkeeper had a right good game. I was very impressed with him. And unlucky with the penalty. It was a good save from Angle's initial penalty, but he was clearly off his line. So them rules are them rules, as they say. And again, Arne Engels beginning to show us all why he was signed for the fee.
I think so.
Yeah. And
I'm enjoying. He's getting into his flow at the very least, and what comes from that could be exciting, because I think once you get into that rhythm and you're flowing well, then I do think the best form comes after that. So I think there's even more to come from Arne Engels as far as I'm concerned, and that's not a criticism of how he's playing. I just think that's what his potential is, which is good. So I'm saying good morning to everyone in the chat. It's great to see everyone. I know everyone's saying morning y'all. Hail, hail, all that. I love all that. It warms the soul to see people saying hello to me on a cold Monday morning. I need to turn my heating on because it's about as cold as Dingwall in here. Hazel Finn saying Kyogo played really well. Engels is playing really well, joining up play. A lot of people mentioning the pitch, Tony. It was pretty rough, and Rodgers mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, that at this stage of the season, pitches get bobbly, pitches get tougher, pitches get a bit frozen, and it certainly was frozen. And I think it's to Celtic's credit that they were actually up for the battle on Saturday, and I think that's what the difference is sometimes. Like, you can tell when the Celtic team are up for it and when they aren't, and it's sometimes not pretty when they're not, but when they turn up and they go, right, we're going to face the challenges today, we're not really bothered about the conditions, we're going to play through the conditions. That's what makes the Celtic team so formidable. The
great thing for me on Saturday was the pitch just wasn't an issue at all.
Yeah.
There was that kind of layer of frost on it when myself and Ryan turned up, and I looked and I thought, oh wow, but it had no effect on the game. And I mean, the park was turning up. I get all that, but Celtic just decided nope, and they played some great football on a surface like that. And getting back to Engels, I just think he's hitting a groove now, John. He's hitting that stride, and as you say, there's a lot more to come from him. He said it himself. He's happy to contribute with goals and assists, but a lot more to come, and I think he feels it himself. And again, getting back to the manager in terms of taking him out the firing line when things maybe weren't going so well for him, and we were observant of that or cognizant of that, saying, there's something not right at the minute and there's no function. He's starting to function now, but we always knew that when he started to function, he would start to motor. He's starting to motor now, and he's got a couple of gears to go up, I think, John, in terms of his quality, but you can see it. The assist for Kyogo was class as well. He got fortunate with the penalty, but he still kept up his 100% record, so happy about that. But all different things. Kyogo playing really well. Even Johnny Kenny's impact when he came on, really liked that. He was busy enough and looked like a guy who has benefited from playing at that Europa Conference League level, scoring in that arena, and he's playing against, decent defences, so he's got something to add as well. So really happy with that. Yeah, lots of comments coming in about Brendan's hand being forced, and I'm glad, like you said at the start, that he did go with that and not trying to put what's the saying? Square pegs into round holes.
Yeah,
that's the saying, isn't it? I try to get that right there in the right order. But and I think Celtic reaped the benefit of that, because it didn't decry from what they were trying to achieve on Saturday. And I thought they went about their business with a bit of zip, a bit of vigour, and a bit of zest. Really enjoyed it.
Hopefully, same again at Dens tomorrow night. Another match that you're heading up to. Celtic all over Scotland at the moment, braving the winter. And it's that time of year, Tony. Transfers is the name of the game. And there was a bit of transfer speculation since we last done the morning briefing on Friday, so we'll just go over that. The main link seems to be with Sondre Aurier, of a Norwegian winger, 21 years old, from Sarpsborg. Not a full Norwegian international, plays for their under 21s. Left winger, right footed, I believe, so perhaps cutting in and perhaps, the alternative to Daisy Maeda that everyone's been talking about Celtic might need. We'll love Daisy Maeda, but, you do need alternative options sometimes. And attracting a young, exciting winger, apparently he's valued in the £7 million range. We, we like that, do we? We like that, Tony?
That's a heavy financial outlay for a 21-year-old.
Yeah.
Oriyaseta, you said? I hope I'm
Or you
not.
said that. I'm going with that. I might be butchering that, but that's the one I'm going with, and I'll stick to it
What
until the
John said,
commentator says otherwise.
what John said, yes, indeed. I think he's the kind of player that I think it's a prototype Celtic signing, isn't it? Get him in young, might be a heavier financial outlay than you maybe want, but if he's been scouted and the due diligence has been done, then it's kind of the money's there. I would be more concerned if, but Celtic's financials, they're they are in a good position and a healthy position in the bank balance. So if that's the guy that they've scouted, then go out and get him. I don't want this to become a long, protracted affair, John. If this is
Yeah,
the target, this is the guy they want, and that's the price, go and get him. Don't let it drag on to the end of January and, then by that point, other people might be interested. If Celtic really want this guy, go and get him. If that's the figure, fine. And if they've identified something in him, again, as you say, for competition for Maeda as well, I think every player needs that, or every good player needs competition. And I think we spoke off air and you said he's got 15 goals and 15 assists in his
in
sharp
total.
career
Yeah,
at the moment. Yeah,
yeah,
those are decent figures,
yeah,
so shows you that he can score and create. So I'm all for that. I would need to do a bit more research on him, and
of course.
I think Stuart Ross is maybe doing a backgrounder on him, isn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, Stuart's got stuff coming up on the website. If not today, then tomorrow. Just digging into the profile
Mm-hmm.
of Orjaseta and what he could offer Celtic, and we like Stuart doing those things. He's very good at that, and he gives people a really good context
Yeah.
of what type of player Celtic might be getting if they do go through with the signing. Obviously, not a done deal yet, and I think far from a done deal. I think the chat at Celtic are in discussions with Sarpsborg, but I think other teams are interested, and I think even teams as big as Benfica are sniffing around, showing a little bit of interest. So there's a way to go on that. As always, things move quickly in the transfer market, but it does seem like Celtic are going to be in that market for that left winger, and that kind of ties in with Luis Palma's stories, and he seems to be finally on the verge of an exit to Rayo Vallecano in Spain. It's not worked out for Luis Palma, has it? And I think that's where we need to upgrade. We need to upgrade on the left to replace what he isn't really offering.
It's one of the disappointing signings from Celtic in recent times because he started okay, didn't he? And everybody
Yeah,
thought he had a bit about him, and I think the penalty incident, John, didn't do him much good. In terms of his kind of relationship with the Celtic supporters, and the double penalty miss, taking it the exact same way, and that kind of lackadaisical approach to it at the time. And Palmer showed up in flashes, but it just wasn't enough for me, John. And I needed him to produce more. And every time I wanted him to produce more, he just didn't do it. And every time he got his chance, he kind of flattered to deceive a lot, didn't he? And and I think it's best for both parties that if this Rayo Vallecano deal can be concluded, then let him do that and then see where it goes after. It's a loan spell initially, isn't it?
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then
I think
potentially,
with these loan spells for the more established players, the loan seems like a mechanism to kind of get
yeah,
them out the door permanently. Similar to what we've kind of seen with Bernabe.
yes,
He's probably going to be heading permanently as well. I was a pretty big fan of Palma initially. I thought Palma was important in that initial period, and arguably a little bit more important than some people realised at the time, where there was that transition from the Ange team to Rodgers, and Celtic were struggling with creativity
yeah,
and struggling for goals. And Luis Palma in those first 3 or 4 months was actually quite important in that Brendan Rodgers team. And Brendan Rodgers utilised him and trusted him to come up, and he did well. And then it hit January, he picked up an injury or two, and he just never recovered for that. And probably because the Celtic team moved on. Do you know what I mean? So this, the Celtic team in the initial stages of Brendan Rodgers wasn't, setting the heather alight,
Mm.
and so Lewis Palmer was standing out in that environment. But then as the Celtic team's getting better, becoming quicker in their build-up play, becoming quicker in their combinations, I don't think Palmer kept up with it, and it is a shame. But it's good. I think what's good about Celtic now is if a player doesn't perform, um, and the signing isn't right, then we're managing to find an exit route for these players quicker than I feel like we did, maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah,
It feels like we're more willing to just cut our losses almost, or even make money, a lot of the money that Celtic have spent back
yeah.
on the players. So there's no real disaster in the Luis Palma signing. It's just one of those things that just didn't work out.
I think the model shows that it's working, John,
Mm.
because even players who don't cut it or make the grade at Celtic, they're still being sold or they're still wanted,
Yeah.
which is a good sign, right? And as you say, they're either recouping the money that they shelled out initially or they're getting a wee bit more on top. So that proves that Celtic's transfer model's working. It's no disgrace not to cut it at Celtic because, as I always say, we have an elite level manager who wants to take the club to a different level altogether, both domestically and in Europe. Some people can cope with that transition and change. Lewis Palmer clearly couldn't. I think that's a valid point that you make, that Celtic just, Rodgers built it up again and Palmer was left in the slipstream. Initially he did well and his numbers were very good, and then Celtic upped to a level and he just couldn't maintain that. And as you say, there was a couple of injuries, but I mean, he came in, he scored against Motherwell, and then he scored against Atletico Madrid in the Champions League. John's temporarily disappeared.
Oh dear, I think you can still hear me. Is that right?
We
I
can
don't know
still
what's
hear
happened
you,
there.
John, yeah. We can't see you, but yeah. As I say, Lewis Palmer, I wish him well. I hope the Rayo Vallecano deal comes off and he gets back to doing what he does best, playing, and then we'll see what it takes us after the loan spell. But I think Lewis Palmer's Celtic career days are winding down slowly but surely.
Let me figure this out a wee bit. See if I can figure something out here. Because this isn't ideal at all. Oh, I'm back, but I'm a black screen. Oh, I'm back with a worse camera. Will that do? That might do. I might need a.
Long before the watershed, John. They didn't want that big ugly mush dominating.
I'm glad I'm back at least. I'm not back with the right camera, but we'll figure that out for next time. Jason Lee was just mentioning there. He thinks Luis Palma's skill set's good for the Spanish game, and I think that there's accuracy in that. And I think if he does well in Spain, it doesn't mean that Celtic have made a mistake in letting him go. Sometimes clubs or leagues and players just aren't the right fit, and we would wish Luis Palma all the best going forward. I think he's had a couple of personal blows in recent times. He was on Instagram. I think he had a personal family loss, so that's never nice to see him. But I always wish players all the best, even if they haven't quite worked out at Celtic. Do you know?
Of course, John, I said there, it's no disgrace not to make it at Celtic. The demands are very high, and you see some players are maybe not the right fit. And nobody wants the players to do well more than ourselves and the fans. The fans are desperate to see them do well, but, it's a fact of life. Sometimes it doesn't happen for certain players, and Lewis Palmer is one of them. He falls into that category, but that's not to say he can't flourish elsewhere. And I think he has to go and flourish elsewhere. And if he does, then good on him. But Celtic just now under Brendan Rodgers, I think he's pretty ruthless in the sense that if you're not cutting it, then you will be jettisoned, and I will bring in somebody that will provide me with what I want.
Another more evidence is that is Odin Holm. Looks like he's heading out on a loan to MLS. LAFC, I think, are interested in bringing him on a year-long loan for the entire MLS season. And I think Holm's a bit different in the sense he's on a much longer contract at Celtic, so there's scope for him to impress in MLS and maybe come back and do something. But he's another one that just doesn't seem to have kept up with the pace of this Brendan Rodgers team, which clearly isn't impressing the training enough to even make appearances lately. So he's another one heading out on loan initially, but you wouldn't be surprised if that becomes permanent as well.
Yeah, and also as well, very seldom does Brendan Rodgers call people out, but both from Lawal and Odin Thiago Holm in the pre-season, the earlier pre-season game before they went on the American tour, they were both called out. I think it was against Queen's Park, if memory serves, at Lesser Hampden, because I was there. And I remember asking the question, and he really said they had a bit to go before they could even think about featuring his first team players. No sooner had he said those words and Bosun Lawal was clinched a deal down south, and Odin Thiago Home has just faded right out of the picture. So early marker laid down. Brendan Rodgers was saying there, and I talk about it all the time, and you said it there, that if you're known pressing in training, then the manager's just training's everything to him, isn't it? It's about your commitment to the cause and what you're bringing in every day. That's your bread and butter every day, training to say to the manager, I'm still around. Odin Thiago Home, a season-long loan, go and get some regular football, go and prove to the manager that you can have something to offer. Because, as I say, you look at that Celtic midfield, Celtic midfield carries the best players in the country at this minute in time.
Yeah,
and you're not breaking into that.
Yeah. And I think even you see Hatate coming back onto a bit of a game as well, just shows that the strength of quality there, even if players are off form, the quality in some of these players is exceptional. Just want to touch on the experience of being in Dingwall, Tony, and chatting to Brendan Rodgers after the game. What was his mood like? What kind of messages was he trying to get across after you spoke to him after the game?
I think he was just sort of saying it was business as usual, John.
Right.
That was the third win in the spin after the Rangers game, but it still irks him because I asked him if the Rangers game irked him, and he gave it.
But he said something like that was never a Celtic team or something.
Yeah,
was that the line?
Was never a Celtic team. He said so. Clearly, words have been spoken, but there was that nod of the head, and that kind of don't remind me or it still hurts type thing. And do you know what? That for me was great because I think in no uncertain terms behind closed doors, he's had word with those players. Said, "No having it. It's not going to happen again. Not in my watch. You did not represent Celtic out there." And you can take getting beat by the better team, but they just didn't turn up, John, at all. And you look at the teams that Rangers have played so far since and just before the Celtic game, teams taking 3 and 2 goals off them and scoring against them. Celtic had one shot at goal at Ibrox, to my knowledge. So it clearly upped him. So he was kind of at pains to sort of say, we're back in an even keel, but we're much better than that performance suggested. We're not there yet, but he's liking what Engels is producing, like what Kygo did. And but he was happy with the way things were ticking along. But I think he's also a man who's got young boys a burn on his mind too. Never mentioned that, but it's like it's coming, it's looming over the horizon, and I think a lot. I mean, it's like that's Celtic's most important game of the season. Can't afford to
it's a weird one, Tony. Because I'm probably similar to you. I never like to talk about games too far in advance, but it does feel, even Saturday, and I think that's right. That's an interesting tone or message to pick up from Rodgers. Is you feel him now building towards that, not even in what he's really saying, but just in his general, demeanor or outlook on Celtic. You can feel him. You can feel it building again towards a peak, hopefully, against young boys. That's what everyone's so excited for this month.
All I can think of, watch that coming over the hill. You know what I mean? It's a young boys a burn game. It's like everything, so much hinging and riding on that. And I think he's just sort of saying, I'm getting these guys primed and focused. And that there, what you saw is somewhere where we want to be by the time this match rolls around. Forget the Rangers game. Forget it as a performance and as a supporter, but I'll not forget it, and I'll make sure that they don't forget it because it was substandard and it's unacceptable.
And it'll be interesting, because obviously the fans have different reactions to the derbies, and even the lingering after effects. Celtic fans aren't thinking about the derby because Ibrox is in meltdown. They're in meltdown at the moment. They're literally in meltdown, even though they won that game. And I don't think that's necessarily relevant for Brendan Rodgers and the team. They'll be digesting that derby in a totally different way to the support, who feel like a lot of them have probably already moved on from that. The laughs and the merriment around football in Glasgow has moved on to continuing crisis at Ibrox, which obviously we saw more evidence of on Sunday. So everyone's having a wee laugh at that. But the Celtic team, I think they do need to feel it as like a hurt. They do need to feel hurt by it and kind of use it as motivation, and that's a good thing. And the great teams, the good teams, always find little slights or perceived, problems or roadblocks along the way, and that's how these these sports people in every sport, that's how they keep their motivation in these moments, because the day to day can be a grind. But if Celtic have this, that they're kind of proving themselves to themselves almost, I think that can be a really strong motivation thing.
It's the performance, John. I think there's a great quote from Jock Stein, and it was after the Partick Thistle League Cup final defeat, 4-1 in 71. And there's footage of Jock Stein saying, I remind my players every time that we could lose any game on any given day. And I think that's what Brendan Rodgers is tapping into. See, if you don't turn up, just because you're Celtic doesn't mean you're going to win. And I think it was resharpening, recalibrating the minds to say, we've got a huge, huge game coming up, guys. And in the lead up to that, forget the Rangers game in terms of the result. But that's a performance that we're going to have to just bury and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And I think he's certainly, because on any given day, you can lose like that. And I think he was more surprised that was in them, because Celtic famously turned a corner. But you know what I mean? I think he thought those performances, you don't get that from this team. And I get that they can have off days. Same happened in 71 with Jock Stein's team, who was supposedly going to go to town on Partick Thistle. Even Frank Boff in Grandstand reading the Biddy printer, famous pictures saying, half time from Hampden Scottish League Cup final, Partick Thistle 4 Celtic 0. He said, seems to be something wrong with the Biddy printer. We'll get the real score to you as soon as possible. It's true, So, and I think Brendan Rodgers was sort of tapping into that and saying, guys, this can happen if you're not at it, and you can get severely scalped. So, these are the life lessons from that. He was talking about the learnings from that, John, and I like that. I like all of that.
Yeah, I like all that too. I like all that part. And it's true up and down the Scottish Premiership. I mean, if you don't turn up, you might get a hiding off Rangers, but if you don't turn up against Dundee tomorrow night, then you might struggle to pick up the 3 points, and that is the week-to-week reality of life in the Scottish Premiership. Despite Celtic's disparity in resources, the players still need to find it in themselves to perform on this match-to-match basis. And the match comes around really quickly tomorrow. It is kind of weird to have an away game in the Scottish Premiership on a Tuesday night. What are we thinking in terms of, what's your gut feeling on Maeda, Kuhn? Are you feeling like they might be rested again for tomorrow and maybe come back for the cup game, or how do you see that panning out?
I'd like to see them be back, John. I've got to be honest.
Yeah.
I've got a feeling that they could probably afford to miss the cup game, but I would want them back for league games. But I think the manager has challenged this team to be perfect up until the young boys game. We have so many games, 4 or 5, is it, before the young boys game? And I think he said to them, I want 5 wins, and whoever takes to the field. And I think that's the mentality now, because Callum McGregor was talking about that relentlessness that they show even in the last 10 minutes against Ross County. But getting back to your point about Maeda and Kuhn, I would like to see them back. I want them back as soon as possible, because I want them to have played enough minutes to be in that team for young boys.
Yeah.
Again, you don't want to take unnecessary risk from them. I get that, but they need match fitness. And I know they're fit players and they've played a lot of football, but even just stepping out for that 1, possibly 2 games can affect your rhythm as well. I need them back in to be in that starting 11.
The alternative to that, just me putting it out there, just as a devil's advocate sort of thing, is Brendan Rodgers is aiming for that treble though, isn't he? And then maybe that one-off cup, maybe he's looking at that one-off cup game as arguably a more important match this week than the Premiership. And then obviously, I mean, Young Boys isn't even far away now. It's next week. No. So if you get them back on Saturday, and that's the one that warms them up for the Young Boys Challenge, that's interesting. So there's a couple of ways it can go. We might get a steer on that. Brendan Rodgers' press conference is later today. There is another press conference because the match comes so quickly. So we'll hear from the manager and another player today. We'll have full coverage of that across the Celtic way. Tony, as I said, you're back up to Dens tomorrow with Ryan, and we'll have full coverage on the website. We've got analysis and bits coming out on the website too for subscribers. And, specifically Sondre Oriesetter, we're doing analysis on him from Stuart Ross, so we'll have that on the site over the next couple of days as well. There's plenty going on, Tony. The world of Celtic moves quickly, but we're all over it. We're all over it.
It never stops. We're all over it. You wouldn't have it any other way, John. Love it, to be honest. But yeah, it's but you just you try not to think about it, but you're like, when's this young boys game? I mean, well,
I think
it's
I
like,
mentioned the young boys game, and you've thought about it ever since, Tony.
yeah,
You're right into that now. You've
and
got
I
your head
hate
in that one.
something like that because I'm usually at one game at a time. The next challenge is Dundee, and we saw last midweek that Dundee can take
Yeah,
points off Rangers and played very, very well, and that was with an understrength team. So I'm sure they'll have some of their familiar names back. And I have to say, I'm a great admirer of the job that Tony Dock's done with
yeah,
Dundee. I think he's an excellent young manager, and took that brave decision to come out of not so much the shadows of Derek McInnes, but in terms of being a number two. And it's a brave call to want to be a number one, and I think he's done exceptionally well with Dundee. And there's another challenge tomorrow, John, that Celtic face, and you have to embrace that challenge. But I think whatever team, again, going back to Brendan Rodgers, the 11 that he puts out, they'll be good enough to beat Dundee, but they have to turn up. It's always the same. They have to make sure that they're at it from the start, but it won't be easy. Never is.
just there, answering the question that Wazza Boy's thrown up. Do we not play Dundee twice? So we actually, in the Premiership, it is Dundee twice. So it's Dundee away, obviously, on Tuesday night. Then it's Kilmarnock and Young Boys. Then it's Dundee at home at Celtic Park. So in the Premiership, it is Dundee back to back, which is another odd. I think that's a result of the League Cup final reschedule and kind of thing, and that's how that's panned out. So that is the case, and as always, the Celtic way will be all over it. We'll be back tomorrow for a morning briefing. I forgot to mention, there's no Hamish today because he's taking a couple of days holiday this week, but he is back. If not tomorrow, then Wednesday. It might be. I think it's tomorrow and Wednesday he's back. So we will have Hamish back on the channel this week. That's why I'm hosting. That's why my camera's failing. That's why it's all gone to chaos, Tony. But I think we'll say goodbye now. We'll say goodbye to all the chat. Thanks for everyone joining us live, or if you're checking this out as the archive. It's been a good chat. I always enjoyed chatting to Tony, even if he's making me nervous about this Young Boys game already. Tony, any last thoughts before we sign off?
No, because I think my nerves are starting to go as well. Next week, Dundee. I'll do the usual. The Dundee, one game at a time. Yeah, that's it.
Well, it is Dundee one game at a time, and as I say, we'll be back with all the chat ahead of Dundee tomorrow, and then live coverage of the game on YouTube. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll say goodbye. Have a great Monday, and hopefully a signing or two would be nice. So maybe we'll get that from Celtic over the next week, and we'll have more to talk about that. But for now, goodbye.